The Friends of the Library is a nonprofit organization that supports and enhances the programs and initiatives of the Charleston County Public Library through gifts of time and money.
Visit charlestonlibraryfriends.org to become a friend and for more information.
Everyone, my name is Susan Hoffius, and I'm going to be moderating this session this afternoon, which is called Cultivating Partnerships for Readers and Authors. And we have a great panel of librarians and bookstore owner, and we're going to get into talking about how readers and authors can connect to each other and using the tools of the library and through bookstores. And so I'm going to go ahead and have all of our panelists introduce themselves straight out of the gate so that you can hear from themselves about who they are and what they do. And then we're going to start talking about the issues of navigating bookstores, libraries, getting authors' works into those places, best practices and things like that. So we're going to start with Darlene Jackson. Darlene, would you go ahead and introduce yourself? Please take yourself off mute.
Thank you. My name is Darlene Jackson, and I am the Chief Deputy Director at the Charleston County Public Library, and I manage all of the frontline branches within our system, and we're at 18 at this point. I have over 30 years of experience with the library, and most of that time was spent on frontline. So lots of experience. And I must say that it's just a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. And Amy?
Hello, my name is Amy Quesenbery, and I'm the LCATS manager, which stands for Library Collections, Acquisitions, and Technical Services for the Charleston County Public Library. I've been in this role since 2017, and I've been with the library system since 2003. So I'm delighted to be here and can't wait to get into this topic. So thank you.
Wonderful. And last but not least, we have Belinda Miller. Belinda, can you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
I'm Belinda Miller, the owner of Turning Page Bookshop in Goose Creek, South Carolina.
Okay, I think we may be having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're going to roll with it. And also, I have an apology to make. This panel is actually called Beyond Amazon. So we've had we had a great panel yesterday with KDP and some other folks. So now we're going to talk about ways that authors can move beyond KDP, move beyond Amazon to get their works into the hands of the public and readers. So Darlene, why don't we go ahead and start with you while we work out some of the technical issues with Belinda, and just talk about how the library functions to connect readers with works, and especially maybe with works written by authors that are independently published or not. So go ahead and let's just talk about that for a little bit. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, so let's start with some background, because I think that would be helpful for those who are not familiar with libraries. So we follow guidelines established by the American Library Association. And this is an international organization in which all libraries look to, whether they are a public library, academic library, or whatever. So they are the guide, so to speak, overall, with policies and services, procedures, that sort of thing. So the first core value, if you look at that site, AmericanLibraries.com, and look at their core values that's listed, the first thing listed is access, and which is key. It's access. And when we talk about access to information, access to our buildings, access to our resources and materials. So if you look at the Charleston County Public Library or any public library, you're going to find that it's similar, that the policies are similar, not exact, but they are similar. So we'll be talking from the Ccpl perspective, Charleston County Public Library perspective, but just know that as we talk about these, our procedures, policies, and how we do things here, that it is similar. And some of the issues that you're dealing with here, you'll probably end up dealing with it with other libraries as well. So since our focus is on getting self-published authors, independent authors into our libraries, we're going to focus on collection development. Our collection development policy explains our selection criteria and all the things that we look at. So our policy can be found on our web page, www.ccpl.org, under About Your Library. So you can look at that, and it explains it in detail. This area is managed by Amy, who is with us, and that's why she's with us, because this is her department, and we'll have an opportunity to hear more details from her, because we have some exciting initiatives that to open pathways for our self-published authors to get their books into our collection. So we are very excited about that. But first, I'd like to share some history of Ccpl's grassroots efforts to bring in authors with various backgrounds, especially African-American authors. As I said in my introduction, I have been here for many years. I started, and over the year of programs, even though a lot of it did not result to books getting on our shelves, we have always been working with our local authors programs. And I would have to say that our Charleston Friends of the Library has been instrumental in that, in terms of funding programs to make it possible for these things to happen. So I have to give a little kudos. So we've had book talks, we've had book signings with authors at various branches. Not only at our large branches, but also at some of our small branches. And at these venues, authors were able to sell their materials. We worked that through our Friends of the Library group, but they were able to sell their books to the audience there.
And just real quick, Darlene, just to follow up about that. So how did you select those authors?
Well, that came through various ways. Sometimes it was an author who literally said, "Hey, I am in this area, I've moved, or this is my home, I have this book, I think it's of interest to you, and I would like to work with you." Sometimes it was that. Sometimes it was, for example, when we opened, I had the pleasure of opening the Johns Island Regional Library. So one of the So what we looked at bringing local talent in to talk about the area, because the Johns Island Regional Library was the first library on that area. So it handled about Guatemala, Kiowa, that area, Kiowa Island as well. So the area that we didn't have a lot of information on was Guatemala Island. So we found the local authors and went after them and said, can you come in and work with us? First we looked at their work, had their work evaluated. I shouldn't say evaluated, but looked at, we involved collection development because we knew that we would eventually want to add that to our local collection, our local history collection. So examples. So, yeah. We open our library for self-published authors to also have space, because we have meeting rooms available too. So we offer that to give them an opportunity to chat with through a book or whatever. So that's provided. The other thing too, we have sent our staff to conferences, major conferences, and not just the American Library Conference or the Public Library conferences, but we also send our staff to like the National Book Club Conference in Atlanta that is founded by Curtis Bunn. So, and the reason for that is that was a way to connect with those authors that were missed through the mainstream publishing companies, but they were there. So that was a way to meet these authors, to connect with them, and pretty much try to get the materials, bring them back to the library. The other thing with that, typically we have designated staff that's frontline, and these staff members, some of these staff members are just passionate. I mean, they're not necessarily, they don't work out of collection development, but they're passionate and they're experts in their field just because of the interest in African American authors. So we utilize them and their expertise to bring to us and to share with collection development those that we need community, because we're not finding them in the mainstream publishers, and they may. So we seek types of I don't want to say obstacles, but we tend to go around those types of issues that we're dealing with. And another thing too, I love the Black Ink Festival. It's wonderful what we're doing. Now, the first festival that we had at the Charleston County Public Library was around 2010, and it was the Capitol Book Fest, the Capitol Book Fest with Kwame, that was brought here by Kwame Alexander. And that was our first big event, and he was the person who brought like Nikki Giovanni for her first visit to the library, which was amazing. And also like Victoria Rowell from The Young and the Restless, which was also exciting. She spoke. But above all of that, we had an influx of independent self-published authors, which was awesome. We could connect with them, not just staff and the public. Both floors at the main library, we were packed. And that gave us an opportunity to purchase materials. So you ask, why these efforts? Why do all of these? And the point is, we recognize the difficulties authors have in getting their books picked up by the big publishers. Now, the big publishers work very well with us because they're able to provide book reviews. Okay. And in working with their authors, they have proofreaders, they have editors to go through their work. They are able to do marketing for them. So we wanted to find ways to get to our local authors because we knew that was a gap. So we go outside the norm. We try to find pathways for our collections, especially our marginalized authors. So we've added equity to our core focus area, which is very significant because as we look at equity, we're looking at equity throughout, not just with our state. We are also looking at equity in our collection to make sure that it is balanced and that it is reflective of all communities, and so that it's represented by authors who may not necessarily appear through the big journal in terms just to look at the reviews and go through the selection process. So in order to give you a good idea, the flow of books, what happens, how we get our books in our system in the process, I'd like to share this clip from one of our Meet Your Library series that can be found on our webpage that covers our book process to give everyone a nice general idea about the selection process. Now, following this video, Amy will come on and she'll talk about some of the, at least one, I think, significant initiative that her department's starting, that's creating a pathway for our self-published authors to get their books on our shelves. So if we can go into the video clip, and then following following that clip, Amy will then step in.
Great. Thanks, Darlene.
Thank you.
Here at the new Bees Ferry West Ashley Library, every book is brand new. But after a while, the books will be checked out a lot and well-loved, and the journey with Charleston County will come to an end. Today, we're taking a complete look at the life cycle of a book. A book's life cycle has 5 stages. First, a team of library selectors decide which titles are a good fit for our collection.
They're basically looking professional reviews from the industry, book lists, Kirkus, and then they're also looking at measures of popularity. For instance, like the New York Times book list.
Readers arrive in large shipments, which are unpacked, processed, and added to the shelves.
That means putting barcodes on the items. Then also our catalogers are working with the title to describe the title for the catalog. The cataloger is who creates all of the descriptive information and all of the metadata that actually makes it possible to retrieve that information.
Now this is the fun part. Checked out over and over again. County and beyond.
Decidedly on the library shelves very long, like it passes around the community. It can really go all over the world depending on where the patron takes it. But it has lived several lifetimes. You know, it isn't like a book that you have on your home shelf.
If there's a collection, you can request it at ccpl.org. And I'll see you next Monday to meet your library.
Great.
Okay.
So great. Amy, take it from here. Tell us more about how your team works. And I'm particularly interested in the role that reviews, which Darlene has also mentioned, and sort of how that plays into your selection criteria.
Sure. So, of course, I'm going to be speaking specifically about our library, but as Darlene mentioned, you'll see a commonality across public libraries, and a lot of, I think, self-published authors are probably, you probably meet some challenges trying to get your work into a public library, just because we do rely so heavily on professional reviews as the sources that I mentioned, book list, library journal, school library journal, and then those are written by professional, these are like industry standard accepted reviews that we can trust that, hey, if this is being vetted and endorsed, we can take a but that we can make a good choice to spend the money to select those, and that they would be a good selection for the library. And then the other thing that really, I think, kind of can stand in place of that is popularity. You know, if we are seeing something that is riding the wave of social media, or, more recently social media, or also, making the circuit of the morning talk shows or the news, anything that's really getting press is also, that's kind of a vote of confidence for that item as well, or that title as well, to put in the collection. And so here is where I think the local, or rather the self-published, which is often local author, is kind of at a disadvantage, because, a lot of the popularity that you see, particularly in conventional like news network, traditional pathways, is really driven by the marketing teams of those large publishing houses. And so if you're not represented by a large publishing house or even a smaller press that has a marketing arm, you're at a disadvantage. So that's why I'm so excited to announce this solution that we've come up with, because at least for, my cat is starting to scream. I'm sorry. He thinks that it's time to eat and it's still 3 hours away. I hope you guys can't hear that, but of course he would start. He's been quiet the whole time. But we've developed a form that we're going to launch February 1st that is basically going to go through a series of questions. It's a way for us to directly engage and receive submissions from authors. It's going to be on our website, ccpl.org, and it'll take the author through a series of questions, and also we will be asking them. Here's where it's going to really be a game changer for us in terms of actually being able to review the material. We're going to ask for a summary and then a sample chapter or two, sort of what publishing houses ask for. And this is how we're going to be able to actually digest this information, because that's one of the biggest obstacles is we don't have a large team. There are 3 print selectors, and if we're receiving something that doesn't have a review and doesn't have the endorsement of popular opinion or popular demand, we don't have time to read the volume of material we receive. We don't have time to read books from cover to cover. But this is a solution that is actually manageable, and we're so excited about it because it's something that we've been trying to figure out a way to really bridge that gap for several years now. So I'm very excited. We'll be launching it, I think, as I said, February 1st, and we're going to actually email a link to all of the participants of this festival. So the authors that are participating in this festival will be among the first to actually use this form. And then we also have an initiative that's in development right now. I'm hoping that we'll see this maybe by the end of this calendar year, that is going to go a step further in helping us celebrate and showcase our local authors. In a way, like through lending, it's an exciting time. So I am excited to hear questions when we get to the question and answer section. I know VaLinda is still going after me, but that's about all I have to say. But yes, just stay tuned, because in a couple of weeks it is going to be just a completely different ballgame for us.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy. I do want to, we're going to come back and have some questions and some follow-up, but I want to talk to VaLinda, who is joining us through a cell phone connection. So VaLinda, can you talk from your perspective as a bookstore owner about the ways in which you select materials that you sell in your books, in your bookstore, and also how you connect with authors who may not be represented through one of the major publishing houses?
Yes, and thank you for allowing me to join the panel. What we do is we encourage all local authors to submit an email request to us, and we will send them an application that explains the process. We would like for them to send us at least one book so that we can review it, but we do explain to them there's not that many reviewers here for us. So it does take us some time to review their book and give them an opinion on if it will fit our bookstore, or we would recommend that they may want to try out with the library to see if they would fit in the library system. Because our local authors, we want them to be known, but we also want them to be known worldwide. They may have a book that would, relate to anybody, even in Alaska. So we want to encourage them to submit an email request and ask for the application so we can help them sell their books in the bookstore. We also have memberships in ABA and CIVA, as well as I have connections with all of the 5 major publishers. And we do encourage the other big publishers to email an application if they would review this book because here's 10 or 15 booksellers that feel that the book is worthwhile, and that we know with their money they can start marketing and probably publishing the book and get it out to a worldwide audience.
So, VaLinda, just to follow up on that, so that I'm sure I'm understanding, you're in fact taking books that are you've selected for your bookstore and sort of feeding them up into the big five. Is that correct?
Yes, some of the books that we get, if we feel that we can encourage other booksellers throughout the United States to review this book and see if it would fit in your store, yeah, we will encourage that as well, is try to fit it in our store and see if it will sell in our store. A good example is the Cocktail Bandit. Their book was published by a local publishing company here in Charleston, and we've had them at the bookstore for events, and we were hoping to have them in 20, but everybody knows what happened in 2020. And I recommended that book to other bookstores in Washington, D.C., because that's where I'm from, as well as a few in California and New York, because I figured they would love that book. It reaches everybody and everywhere. And I think Politics and Prose or Mahogany, I think one of them did pick that up. So we do try. We feel that it would reach out to other audiences. We do give it a good shot to not only booksellers, but to the Ccpl organization, NABA organization, and ABA.
Fantastic. So go ahead, Belinda.
No, I was.
So one of the questions, so we had a session yesterday about Kindle Direct Publishing. A lot of self-published authors publish through KDP, and that's their principal marketing and distribution network as well. So my question for the librarians and for our bookstore owner is, how do people who publish within KDP or who have sort of Amazon as their principal distributor, what advice would you give to them in terms of making their product, which is created in the Amazon universe, visible and potentially of interest to you as librarians and as booksellers? How can that work? How can we move beyond Amazon or through Amazon to different outlets, different distribution networks?
I mean, that's a bit of a challenge for us right now. Simply, at least bringing something that is sort of native to that, to the Amazon or to the Kindle universe, just because ebooks, we have two ebook platforms, Overdrive and Hoopla, and they're very proprietary. We're still trying to kind of figure all of that out, but we're open to that we're looking at a particular product that we're still just kind of looking at it, but something that would integrate the different platforms into one easy, seamless interface. And perhaps it would be a possibility that we could make something like that work if we were able to find that solution. But the ebook landscape, just with the multiple platforms and the multiple pricing, which that's not really relevant to this particular discussion, but it's very complicated. And so just navigating that and trying to find a solution is a little difficult, but we're interested. And so that's about the best I can tell you at this point, but we're looking for solutions.
Great. VaLinda, can you speak to that question of sort of how Amazon authors fit into your world?
Yeah. One of the things I tell local authors are you cannot restrict your books to one type of system, the Amazon system. I recommend that they reach out to Libro. I also recommend that they reach out to Ingram Sparks. And Penguin has a system where they can also sell your book, in which a bookstore can also purchase the book from that publisher. Now, as for Ingram Spark, they don't deal with Create Space. I think Create Space is now obsolete, I'm not sure. But they will show you the procedures on how to take your book from the Amazon format to their format, because Ingram is a publishing company as well. And I do recommend that they use those to have it in more than one format, not just in ebook, not just in paperback, to have it with anybody else. I do give those recommendations.
Great. Okay. In terms of publishers or authors who are publishing through smaller presses, here in Charleston we have Evening Post Press, for example, a couple of other local presses. How actively, or how much of, how do you interface with those local publishers for the works that they're representing? So we're not talking about, Amazon right now. We're not talking about somebody who's, working, with something that they've produced independently, but through smaller houses. What are your relationships like with the smaller houses that exist both in the city here in Charleston, but also regionally, your John Blair's, things like that? VaLinda, can you speak to your relationship with some of the smaller publishers who maybe have maybe not as robust distribution system, and what you would recommend?
Yes, we have reached out. We have one that we work with, Penworth Publishing. They're local to Charleston. And she has brought us a few authors and their books to have author signings and to have their books sold and out and sold in the store. And of course, Evening Post, Arcadia, and any local publishing company can come to us and ask if we can sell some of their books. We're always asking for them. We're always on the social media to see if anybody will reach out to us. But so far, it's only been about 3. And we figured out a way to, depending on what type of books they have, if they would fit into the store here, or I may recommend that they take their book to another store, like I did for the Cocktail Bandit. It helps when you have a wide variety of other booksellers, and they know what sells in their store, and they sort of can give us an idea of what they would accept as well.
Are you asking me a question?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to kick it over to you to talk about the sort of smaller, more local, or the publishers that don't have the.
It's interesting. We really take our selection approach more title and author rather than focused like by publisher. And so our South Carolina room librarian is sort of an auxiliary selector for us. And so she often points us points us to new material, or not material, but it is material, but new books that are published by those local companies. So, that's sort of an interesting difference, is that we're not really, in direct, we're not approaching from library to publisher so much as we are seeking title and author. So that is, yeah.
Darlene, did you have anything to add? Darlene, did you have anything to add? And if so, you need to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yes, perfect. I would like to speak on Arcadia Publishing. That publishing company has been wonderful in terms of local history. And we enjoy just collecting their materials. A lot of it is, I mean, if you look in our collections, you will see that it is kind of spread out, within our branches, but especially the South Carolina room. And we have found those sources invaluable, to be quite honest with you, especially in terms of local history, or maybe one aspect and in a community or whatever. And just as Amy said, to support what Amy said, we do look at titles, but I do know that Arcadia, for instance, with that we do rely upon a lot of those publications for a lot of our local history.
I'd like to add something too. Darlene is absolutely right about that. One thing to think about with our approach for the public library is we're curating a collection. And so I think that really explains why we're sort of looking at things more granularly, looking at a title that fills a need, or, like a collection or subject gap. That is not to say that there aren't public libraries that take that publisher approach. It's certainly a good approach to take, but I think that when you're trying to be intentional about shaping a collection and having, kind of a focus, and making sure that it's balanced. And, if you're talking about nonfiction, for instance, you really are looking for titles that fit that need, and then you start noticing authors. And I think then at least our collection strategy really kind of moves out from to publishers as sort of a third degree, which is not to say that it isn't useful to re-examine, the way that we do things. I was talking to basically my counterpart, a colleague for Nashville Public, and she definitely takes the publisher approach. And it certainly serves them well. So it's really just kind of a shift in thinking and approach, and requires a bit of strategy to make sure that you're, covering, what you're trying to achieve each fiscal year. So does that make sense? There you go. Okay.
One question that I think is relevant to some of the earlier sessions that we had today was sort of how the landscape or the discussions have changed over the last year and a half in terms of you're talking about curating a collection, you're talking about building a collection, but there are also barriers that are presented for African American authors and people of color. So are there discussions within the library community, particularly within the circulating, the sort of acquisitions departments, about how to provide some equity, and how does that conversation look, not just at Ccpl, but in terms of the larger library audience?
Absolutely. Okay, so that is something that it hasn't just been in the last year or so. It's certainly more and more libraries, I would say, certainly within the last 5 years is when I think that if you were to chart, if you were to look at conference offerings, for instance, sessions at like, for instance, our American Library Association conference, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of planning on how to do a diversity audit of your collection. We have one in planning stages right now, and my selection team is working on. It's a complex process because you want to get it right. You don't want to just you don't want to just do something because you recognize that it needs to be done, but then you don't get good results or usable results. And, so they are they're in the stages of planning kind of a multi-staged plan. But I can tell you one thing that seems to be the easiest approach, and in fact is what have been working with right now, is to actually audit what you already have on the shelves is a long-term process, and you have to define exactly what you're wanting to look at. Are you looking at, when you're looking at a work, are you looking at the author? Are you looking at a protagonist? Are you looking, what are you measurably counting? But the easiest way to launch into this is to look at what you're selecting. Each order you're selecting, look at what you're selecting, and really kind of put that under the lens, and so that is something that my selectors are already starting to do. And one of the children's and YA selector was actually she took a diversity audit course during the pandemic. It was offered by ALA. And that was one of the suggestions, was this is the way to at least launch this, because you can start doing that now, because that's at the point of every order. As you're building a cart, look at the representation in your cart, and then you turn inward to the collection and see, how have we been doing? What can we do better? But it really is a pretty sizable undertaking, that you have to plan. But that is something that is happening all over the country, and I think we're just going to see that becoming more and more common. So.
Darlene, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Go ahead.
I'd just like to add that in addition to what Amy mentioned, with all of the emphasis that we're placing on really looking at our collection and to make sure that that equity is built in, we're also dovetailing that with programs. Just as we shared that the video clip with you in our Meet Your Library series, we are communicating what we're doing through various formats in social media. And I know that it's a little hard right now to see, because in COVID, all of our programs are virtual. However, even with that, if you follow some of our programs, you'll see that there is a major effort to make sure that there is correlation and that there is a balance. So as we move forward and do more with our collection, at the same time, we will continue with programming and add more to dovetail it together, so that it can reach even a larger audience. Because as you know, some are readers, some of our, audience are readers, and some are there, they need to see pictures and videos and that sort of thing. And so it's an effort. It's not just one area. And when I mentioned earlier about equity, we are looking at it in all areas to make sure, meaning we're looking at our community as well as looking at our collection, because in order to really do an audit, we must look at the community, look at the demographics of that community, interests of that community. So it is a huge undertaking, but it is something that we're excited about, because with that, we will also build programs and build other formats in at the same time.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then VaLinda, do you have anything that you want to add sort of about your community of independent bookstores in terms of sort of the messaging that you're hearing through your professional organizations in terms of equity and access?
Yeah, ever since the pandemic and especially last year and all the protests and everything, we have created so many new organizations to ensure that we cover a range of genre and people and authors throughout the United States. And a lot of the booksellers are taking the extra time to find books that reflect the community that their store is in. And we've also told the publishing company that it's great that you are now promoting a lot of African American authors, but I have gone back to the publishers to say, you need to go to all of the states and look for local authors and don't let Amazon take them. And you can promote the same types of books by the same types of authors. But right now, some of the publishing companies, I was on a meeting yesterday and last night, are having some issues trying to find diverse authors. And I was a little concerned about that, and I said, I don't know how you can say that. There's all these authors out there. So as booksellers, the community I'm in, we are working extremely hard to make sure we have a variety of authors throughout all of our bookstores.
Fantastic. Great. So it looks like our time is just about up. I think I'll just throw it out there, see if anybody has any closing remark, anything they want to say that they didn't have a chance to say. Anybody can unmute themselves to chime in. We don't have any questions in the feed, but we have gotten some good affirmations through the feed, so that's great. And people are especially excited about the initiative from the library to sort of self-nominate and get people's works in. So if we don't have any final remarks from our panelists, I want to thank all of you. Thanks again to each one of you for being there. VaLinda.
I would like to bring out that one of the things that the independent bookstores have been doing, and they have been trying to increase that, is to work with their local libraries. Being that I'm a fan of the Charleston County Library and a fan of Miss Darlene, I always encourage people when they come into my bookstore that if I don't have the book, I will literally look on the Charleston County Library website to see if they have the book. Now, I can order the book and they can buy it later, or they can go to the library and pick up the book. But I like to work with the library because they have had author signings there for our bookstore. And we appreciate them for doing that because when you work with the libraries, you're not just coming into your community. You are literally coming into the whole state. The Charleston County Library, I think I can say this, it's one of the largest libraries in the state of South Carolina. And their selection and their team members and their directors and their people and the Charleston County Friends of the Libraries and the Friends of the State Libraries, they're the ones that's helping us, booksellers, get these authors out there in focus, in people's face, and in people's hands. So I just want to thank them for helping me in my bookstore to move forward and to include everybody.
Amen. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well,
yes, thank you. Thank you. And
thank
it's
you very
mutual.
much.
I must add that it is mutual. We have had many wonderful programs that was joint, that in which we had VaLinda's bookstore there and so supplied books for us, and that is invaluable. And I would say for the authors, for any author that might be listening to this, just to kind of keep that in mind, because that's another pathway. That is another pathway. Even if it's not through the library, it could be through a bookstore. And VaLinda, I highly recommend reaching out to her and working with her as well as us. Thank you.
I agree. And I would also add that at least for the last several years through Black Ink, VaLinda has been the the unofficial, but definitely go-to bookstore vendor for us for the last several years, and we're grateful for all of her help with Black Ink over the last few years. So, Belinda, thank you very much. Amy, Darlene, thank you all so much. Anybody who would like to have a one-on-one conversation, people are welcome to go to the lounge and take a seat at the panel, where some of our panelists may be able to go and spend a few minutes, answer some direct questions. Also in the arena, VaLinda's Turning Page Bookshop is a sponsor, and please go and see her page and take a look and click on that yellow I'm interested button to follow what she has going on. And also, of course, the Ccpl has a page at the arena as well, and Black Ink couldn't happen without their help as well. So thanks to all of you, and we're gonna take this as a wrap. We're gonna have some author readings coming up, and then another panel tonight, and of course another day of exciting Black Ink programming tomorrow. So thanks everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you.